Where there's smoke, there's silence, and it's hard to comprehend. In test after test after test, 13 investigates and local fire departments have discovered in rooms full of heavy smoke, ionization smoke alarms did not activate for a long time. And in some of our tests, the ionization smoke detectors did not go off at all.
If there would have been a family in there, they'd have died.
So then how did all the smoke alarms get one of these? A seal of approval from Underwriters Laboratories. A UL seal is very powerful. It's considered proof that a product is safe. In fact, the nation's largest smoke alarm manufacturers defend their ionization smoke alarms by simply pointing out they've been tested and approved by Underwriters Laboratories.
The reality is, if it's a UL-listed smoke alarm, when that smoke hits the alarm, it will sound the alarm.
John Dredgenberg is a spokesman for UL. He says all UL-approved smoke alarms work because inside this 1.5 million square foot testing facility near Chicago, the smoke alarms are tested to make sure they meet strict standards. So then how does he explain our recent tests?
This one's not going off.
Tests that show smoke detectors not activating in rooms full of heavy smoke. Do we agree that in a situation like that, the smoke alarms should be going off?
There should be an alarm sounding. What we're really looking at is when the smoke concentration in a room is a hazard to human life, that's when the alarm should go off.
We're talking about a room full of smoke.
The fact is, we know if it's a working smoke alarm, when the smoke hits that alarm, it will sound the alarm.
That just doesn't make sense. You stated that when the smoke hits the alarm, we know it's going to go off. But yet we see situations where that doesn't happen.
Well, I'm talking from a scientific standpoint. When the smoke gets to the alarm in the proper density, the proper concentration, it will go off.
Is there any scientific explanation for why in this real world situation we have smoke detectors that are not going off in a room full of smoke?
I really don't know.
Dredgenberg is quick to point out all of the tests conducted by Channel 13 and Indiana fire departments are not scientific. And he's right. That's why we came here, to the middle of Texas and the campus of Texas A&M University. Inside this old home, the laboratory of Dr. Don Russell. It's where he's tested hundreds of smoke alarms over the past 10 years. And what happens here is science. On this afternoon, Dr. Russell and some of his grad students are setting slow, smoky fires in the lab to test the response time of ionization and photoelectric smoke alarms. They turn out the lights so they can scientifically monitor smoke levels the same way UL tests smoke levels. Infrared cameras and high-tech computer programs are constantly monitoring the smoke and the alarms.
That's a photo.
We watched the whole test from another room, safe from the smoke and toxic fumes. The results of this test? Nearly identical to those in Indiana.
All the photoelectric detectors have gone off, and we have 3 ionization detectors that we're still waiting on.
1 hour into the test, 3 out of 6 ionization smoke alarms did not sound at all, even though the amount of smoke that was in that room unacceptably high by UL standards.
Our eyes didn't lie. The smoke was there. It was scientifically measured on both sides of the smoke detectors. It's clearly thick, and those detectors weren't going off. I call that a big problem.
And it's a problem Dr. Russell has seen with ionization smoke alarms for a decade. He says in smoldering fires, his tests show at least 1 in 5 ionization smoke alarms never sounds at all. And yet those alarms are approved by Underwriters Laboratories. Dr. Russell thinks he knows why.
Their science isn't any good, frankly. As a scientist, practicing science that doesn't replicate what the world really is in terms of physics is worthless.
Dr. Russell and other critics of UL say for decades, smoke detectors have been tested in unrealistic settings, settings that do not reflect real-life scenarios.
When we do the test, we do it in a closed room with absolutely no air currents whatsoever.
But in the real world, smoke alarms are used where there are air currents.
Our constituents don't live in laboratories. They live in homes and apartment buildings. That's where that smoke detector is going.
Hindsight's always 20/20.
Jim Roberts is a member of a UL committee that helps design the standards for smoke detectors. And he says the current testing standards do need to change.
No test is perfect, and what we have now is far from perfect. But it's the best that we could develop in the era that it was developed.
That era was 30 years ago, which means much of UL's current testing standard is based on old-fashioned materials that burned much different than the synthetic materials in homes today.
We're going to keep pushing that envelope forward.
Jim and other committee members are now considering major changes to how smoke detectors are tested. UL recently conducted a study that proves what critics had suggested, that modern materials do produce much different types of smoke and burn much quicker than those used 30 years ago. Based on that study, smoke alarms could soon be in for much tougher testing.
Now we're looking at the possibility of making changes that would enhance public safety.
Progress is inevitable. And in this case, it is a matter of life and death, and that's driving all of us until we get the best possible detector that we can to put in your house.
A new standard will not come quickly. UL just set up a new task group to begin considering changes. In the meantime, UL recommends you have both ionization and photoelectric smoke alarm technology in your home. We've partnered with H.H. Gregg to help you get a dual sensor smoke alarm at a discounted price. You can get those at any area H.H. Gregg store. And if you aren't sure what type of smoke alarms you have in your home, check out WTHR.com. We've posted information there to help you figure it out. I'm Bob Siegel, Channel 13 Eyewitness News.